and welcome to Unapologetic Women, a podcast about current affairs, culture, politics, life, and how we got here. Brought to you by Toni and Sorcha. These are unscripted conversations about things we care about, not things we are experts in. Oh, and there's probably going to be a bit of swearing too. Toni, how are you doing?
I'm good. Still stuck in Vancouver, but plowing through.
Plowing through. That feels like a common thread at the moment. Yeah, I'm good. I'm in Boston in the gross rain, but definitely plowing through. I wanted to completely just kick it off today with Hillary Clinton.
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah, in my quarantines, I feel like, as everyone has been, watching all of the TV, Hulu, Netflix. You're all, I'm sure, doing well right now amid the pandemic. But so a lot of people have been talking about Hillary. It came out mid-March. It's a 4-part docuseries on Hulu, and it's the first kind of her commentary of 2016 and what that was like for her. But it's not just 2016, it's her whole public life. And they do a piece also on like her as a child, the family she grew up in, what that was like. And they really beautifully interweave sections of 2016 into every part of her life, from, you know, being born to meeting Bill, to being at Harvard, to, you know, going through and being a law firm partner, to Bill running for governor, to him running for president, to him losing, to her running for Senate, like the chronology of her life. And they interweave.
It sounds like it's a meet Hillary, basically.
Yeah, it really is. Like, meet her and the defining moments of her life. And they've just been able to kind of really beautifully, through storytelling, interweave the 2016 election and like key moments of that into her whole life, which is just such a good, like, cinematic experience. But yeah, so I wanted to chat to you about that particular docuseries, and also just share with everyone. Don't really care how you feel about Hillary,
Yeah,
but you should watch it, because it is a who wrote this? Someone on I Love Rotten Tomatoes. I use it as my review point, and someone actually wrote an affectionate portrait of a political icon that digs deep, regardless of how you feel about her.
Oh, so yeah, I like that. It does feel like the behind. What's this like? I was going to say unscripted, but no, it's like the real Hillary, like her whole, like bringing her whole self and getting to discover the woman that I think very few people, because I think that was the big thing, wasn't it, with Hillary, that people disliked, is that, you know, she came across very prepared and scripted, but we didn't actually get to know who she was as a woman, as a human being. So it sounds like, is this helping with that?
So it's funny you bring that up, because that was like one of the many themes of 2016, of, you know, when you go into focus groups and people would just say things like, I just don't trust her. I don't know why. There's just something about her. I don't know what it is, but there's something. I don't feel she's honest. I don't feel I can connect with her. Or I feel like she's, and, you know, there's 1,000 reasons why that was amplified. One thread that they touch on in the documentary is Bernie Sanders coming across as this, you know, anti-establishment person who was there to coalesce all of the Democratic Party around, you know, removing the establishment, and presented Hillary as the establishment, when, if you actually look back at her life, she was in and this will be my personal opinion, but she was anything but establishment, right? Like, she was a part of the women's movement. She was seen as a extreme feminist back in the days of, you know, burning of bras and not shaving legs, and being, you know, one of 7 women in her law class at Yale or Harvard. But yet she was tarnished with this brush, especially in the 2016 election, of being part of the establishment. And the other thread that people pick on, Toni, is her choice to stay with her husband after many very public displays of him cheating on her, or you know, saying he didn't but actually did. And one that I had completely forgotten about in the noise of 2016 was the night before the second to last debate. Trump did a press conference with 6 women who had accused Bill Clinton of sexual misconduct, talking about...
I can't remember this at all.
Neither could I, until they gave kind of a little brief of that when they were in the documentary, or docuseries, sorry, and she's doing her debate prep, she's getting ready, and they flash to this image of Donald Trump sitting there with 6 women who had accused Bill Clinton of something. And they didn't give a lot of airtime to whatever the content he covered in that press release, but that was the news. It wasn't that Hillary did really well in the debate, that she talked about policy, that she called him out on, his very famous remark of grabbing women by the pussy. Yeah. It was why did Hillary choose to stay with her husband when all of these women are coming out and accusing? Why did she make that choice? Can she be trusted to make other decisions?
How is that more important than a very personal decision that she took? What was it, 30 years ago? 20 years ago?
Yeah, like literally. And I just, that to me is the nasty side of politics at its core. Like, let me find one thing and amplify it before we go into something that's actually important, that's actually talking about the topics, that's actually digging into policy change that she wanted to enact in 2016. And we'll shift the narrative because Trump knew he could. And Trump knew his name, his voice was newsworthy in a way that people just followed whatever thread he was pulling at without actually covering the real substance and the real story. And that to me was the epitome of 2016 and what went wrong and how it went wrong.
Yeah. It's interesting hearing you talk about that, Sorcha. It brings me back to, and I'm going to botch this, so for the life of me can't remember who, but I believe it, I'm not actually going to say the name because I don't know, but I believe it was one of the journalists or one of the editors at one of the big newspapers that came forward a couple of years ago saying that the media absolutely had a big role to play in Trump being elected because of the amount of coverage they gave to all of his stories. Not because it was newsworthy, but because it sold. Like it was the new thing that everyone wanted to talk about. And even though everyone was talking about it in a lens of, this is never going to happen, he's never going to get elected, this is never going to go through, but oh my God, this is all wild. And I feel like we're in this moment in time in history, we're in that same position right now, giving a lot of air coverage to all of this noise. And it feels like maybe we haven't learned the lessons of 2016 of you absolutely have a role to play if you're going to continue giving this person a microphone and a voice.
Well, and so Hillary touches on that. And I think just for folks listening, how the docuseries is filmed is it's Hillary in her comforts of her own home. It's nice. Bill in the comforts of his own home. It's Chelsea, their daughter, and it's key reporters and key staffers of the campaign and of Hillary and Bill's public life as a whole, all filmed like in their own comfort zone. Mm. And then there's imagery that's kind of interweaved in and video and B-roll that's interweaved in to them kind of telling a story and a narrative on top. And there's, probably 15 minutes in total of the 4 hours where there's questions that you hear being prompted. It's a really unusual, I found unusual way of filming it, but for me, it was very beautiful in how it was done, of just that conversation and that story coming through with the visualization of, her on the road in Iowa, or Bill in Arkansas running for governor, whatever it was, whatever the fitting video or visual content was. It's just a very good visualization of her story and being able to go into it. But she digs into the media piece a lot. And I think, they actually have an NPR reporter as one of the people that they're interviewing throughout the docuseries, and a Washington Post journalist. And they talk about Bill Clinton's presidential bid and the similarities of deep polarization that were happening back in the 90s at that time that we tend to forget, right? History repeats itself. We know that, but this series really showed me that in a way that I hadn't really thought about. And in particular, there was one which I had completely forgotten about. The Clintons had been accused of murder. Yeah, one of the, I can't remember his specific title, but he was in the White House. He was a friend of theirs from Arkansas, and he went and committed suicide in DC. And everything came out. He was found in a prominent park in the residential DC area. He'd committed suicide. his body was found, and they went to the funeral, and then all of a sudden there was a news frenzy that it made sense that the Clintons could have killed this man because they wanted to remove him. He knew too much, and they were changing tracks. And so it was legitimately news. Like people went out there and reported on the idea that the Clintons could potentially have killed this man. And it was the noise, not news, to harken back to one of the wonderful women that we've talked about a few times, Jessica Yelling, but like this was not news. And it was on the front page of newspapers. It was talked about on CNN. It was talked about on Fox and MSNBC that, you know, something's happened here. Something foul play has definitely taken place. And how do we know what it is? And throughout their life, that's a very, like, you know, dramatized example, but throughout their lives, their public lives, there were constantly these things that they kept being accused of that were taking away from whatever goodness they were trying to do in the world. And every single one of them proved not guilty. Every single one of them. But once it's out there, it's out there. And people will always latch onto it, right? And so to then bring it back to 2016, they're talking about it like the people, if they, you know, they're in a room with a mixture of women and men between the ages of 45 and 65, they remember this. They are triggering back to when Bill was in office and Hillary was the devil who was leading charge on the idea of healthcare as a human right, right? She was the first lady. She shouldn't have done that. That's not her responsibility. How dare she, right? And they're remembering back to this idea that she was an audacious woman who was outspoken and living well beyond what a first lady can rightfully do. And again, these accusatory things kept popping up. And folks just grounded themselves in it of like, that's why we don't trust her. Because back in the day, she did this. Or that's why, you know, she can't be trusted because Bill Clinton did all these things and she stood by him. Like, she doesn't know how to make good decisions. And like, man,
and the list goes on.
It hit me.
I was going to say something, but hearing you say it hit me a couple of times. Talk to me about that, because I know that 2016 was, I mean, as for many women, but also I don't think just women, for many people was a pretty brutal year. But I think for someone like you you were doing the job that you were doing, by that, I don't mean to be cryptic, but the job that Sorcha was doing was working for a tech company that, you know, the same job that I was in, selling software, to political parties and politicians everywhere. And like that just hits when you've got your personal need and preferences of who you want to be elected, but you're still out there, obviously, making sure that you're democratizing democracy and allowing everyone to run for office. So you were much more embedded in the US politics, but what did watching this documentary do to you for that?
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that question up, Toni. I think to share my answer to that, I have to go back a little bit. So in 2015, tail end of 2015, like October-ish time, summer of 2015, I got the opportunity with the public affairs firm I was working with at the time to fully kind of embed myself into the Hillary Clinton campaign. And so we were hired on to work with Hillary's campaign. And so that was a number of different event logistics. That was engaging with key politicians in the New England area for endorsements and op-eds and surrogate events and fundraisers, etc. And so I was kind of in that bubble, and I loved Hillary Clinton. I always had a fascination for her as a kid. And I think, you know, Bill Clinton came to the local village that my family are from in Ireland, and he played golf on Ballybonan golf course. And so the Clintons were always a part, like a beacon in my mind of like this American utopia. So I always had a real passion and love for her. And when I had the opportunity to, you know, be a part of that campaign, I was so excited, so excited. And I worked kind of tooth and nail on that campaign until end of Feb 2016, where we closed out with an astonishing loss in New Hampshire. Bernie Sanders beat us by like 28, maybe even more points. And, you know, there's 1,000 reasons why that happened. The field was never the field program wasn't as good as it could have been. We didn't have any traction with youth voters. Bernie Sanders' team really leaned in on, in New Hampshire, you can do same day registration and voting. So he really leaned in on the universities in New Hampshire, getting students registered and also voting at the same time. It's also his neighboring state. He's from Vermont, New Hampshire, and Vermont abut each other. And so that was an astonishing loss and was heartbreaking and gut-wrenching to me. But, being in the campaign, I did have some insight into like what her trajectory looked like for delegates moving forward and going into South Carolina primary, and where she did extremely well and continued to do so. But yeah, so my last
question. When you say astonishing loss, astonishing in do you mean like historical? Do you mean like what unprecedented? Didn't expect it? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so she won Iowa. So Iowa was the first primary in the nation as a caucus, and she won Iowa, but not by a dramatic amount.
Okay.
It was very close. And moving into New Hampshire, the polls were out for months and weeks that she was, at a loss, like was going to lose. But when you're in a campaign, the only way I can describe it is like you're blindsided. Like no matter what's happening out there in the world, you are getting back your field IDs, right? So you're getting back your 1s, your 2s, your 3s, your 4s, your 5s. That's strong support all the way to lean away.
Yeah.
And you're in this bubble of like, okay, I know that we've got 70% ID'd 1s. And so the whole ground game is about getting your vote out. Yeah. And so no matter what the polls are saying, as someone who works the campaign, your whole thing is like, we're going to do it. We're going to get the vote. Like, we have the IDs. We have them. We know that these people support her. So we just have to get them to the polls, right? So that's like an aggressive Rise to the Polls program. That's an aggressive full-on GOTV the weekend before. And so for me, it was astonishing in that we didn't do it, right? We didn't do what we set out to do. There wasn't necessarily anything. Well, obviously it was a historic, first woman running in a Democratic primary, like all of that. But I wouldn't say it was like a historic defeat. Okay. Does that make sense, Toni?
No, that makes sense. It sounds, what I'm hearing from you there again, as someone who's, I have done canvassing before with my dad in the UK mostly, a little bit in Brussels, but I've never been part of a grand campaign. I've never been part of a national campaign. But what I'm hearing from you is you basically have to survive this job. You have to be all in. And the only way you can be all in is you have to sort of close, you're I guess you're open to what's happening on the outside world, but you're not. Like, that's the only way to put one foot in front of the other and to keep on going, because the work is, is like a mountain to climb up. So it sounds like that's what you meant when you said that, of just like, it's you get lifted out of your day-to-day campaign work and you look around and you go, holy crap, how did we end up here? Like, that's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah. Your bubble gets popped. Your bubble just gets popped. And for me, it felt like the floor had been removed from underneath me.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So that was February, and I, at the time, was in the process of changing jobs, right? Like, I had been really fortunate. I'd been working with this public affairs firm, but I had the opportunity, right, to transition into tech and politics. So I had taken my job at Nation Builder at the end of 2015, but I had a commitment to the Hillary campaign and to my old company that I would kind of work that out through February, so until after the primary.
Yeah.
So primary happens, I pack up my bags, I drive across the country, and I moved to Los Angeles to work with the company I work with now. And that I kicked that off end of Feb, and fast forward to May of 2016, and I get pulled into a room with our CEO, our chief of staff, and VP of customer strategy or something. And my role at the time was consultative in nature, of making sure that folks were leveraging our software, for lack of a better word. And I knew that Donald Trump was a customer of Nation Builders when I was starting there. But, in February of 2016, Donald Trump was a joke. He was a joke Republican candidate. And so it was like, okay, this guy's using the software that whatevs, right? Like, fast forward to May, gets a little more serious. And so I was one of the only people on staff who had experience with a presidential campaign, with both my work with Obama and Warren coordinated and Hillary's. And so I got pulled into that room to have a conversation about, all right, we need to support this customer. And, you seem to be the best person for the job, right?
What was that moment like?
It was weird, right? Because I had lived in this world of Democrats only, the Republicans are evil. Yeah. I'd lived and breathed that since 2012,
us
right?
Versus them.
Us versus them. And there was a part of me that was like, this is ridiculous. Like, this person's never going to win. So, like, fine, whatever. I'll work with them. It's fine. And there was another part of me that was like, hey, we're here because everyone has the right to run for office, right? Like this concept of democratizing democracy, which is what Nation Builder is built for. And everyone has the right to lead and everyone has the opportunity to lead. And so I had this constant conflict of, yes, I agree with that. But also, God, this guy's an idiot, right? Like he is a bigot. He is a sexist. He is a racist. He is, the list continues, right, of my own personal beliefs of that. But I truly, and still do to this day, believe that everyone has the right to actually step up and lead. And it is the responsibility of the general populace to make the decision of whether or not that person or that individual is the right person for the job.
Yeah.
So we wrap up that meeting. It's all kind of teed up, and again in May of 2016, he still wasn't a very serious candidate. And as we keep powering through the primaries, it becomes real. And in June of 2016, it's announced that he is the Republican nominee, and that was a wild day of just thinking back to late 2015 into early 2016, and the jokes of, Donald Trump is running for president. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, here he was, the Republican nominee, even though a big swath of the Republican Party had been diminishing him and absolutely just, he was an other. He wasn't a serious person to be taken. He was going to ruin the Republican Party, and that continued. And then all of a sudden there was this sharp shift of, he's our nominee, and now we all fall in line. And you saw people like Ted Cruz, who Trump had abused his family, his wife, himself on the stage, on the debate stage. Same thing with Jeb Bush, right? Like the personal persecution that Donald Trump did to those candidates. And then all of a sudden they have to drop in line and be at his beck and call as we navigate now, 4 years later, of what it looks like to be in a Trump's Republican Party. And I had to work with his campaign team every day on digital infrastructure, on how to mobilize volunteers, different event configs, and I won't go too into the details, but it was a customer of mine every day, and it was excruciating. There were a lot of people I didn't tell that that Trump was a customer, or that I did anything with them, because I was on the other side of it, where I saw everything as, if you are wearing blue, then you're good. If you're wearing red, then you're not. And I didn't know how to share with people what my full belief was. And watching this documentary back, just, it hit so hard of everything that Hillary Clinton and her whole team faced every day, and the persecution of being a woman and running for office and going up against someone who you genuinely felt like, if this was a job interview, right? Hillary Clinton on paper is the most qualified candidate with the most experience, and she wins the job, right? Like, point blank. You look over here and he does not have that experience or credibility, or anyway. And the documentary really just it kicked me in the stomach. And the very last episode is the one where they go through and the results are trickling in, and they finally realize that she's not gonna win, and it's his. And I think it's her comms person or someone comes into her, and they've got kind of the B-roll of it, of like, do you want to do your concession speech tonight? And she was like, no.
I got shivers.
She couldn't do it.
Just hearing those words, like knowing that this was like Like, truly, I am, like, my hair is on end. But knowing this was finally her time, her shot, hers for the taking, or most of us that lived in that either bubble or that thought it was the right time for women and she'd be the perfect person to kick it off, I cannot even imagine having to hear those words. And the power of saying no. And the reason I say that is I just saw on one of those silly Instagram posts, someone saying no is a complete sentence. And I was like, oh, I don't know why I love that, but I love that. It's like that, hearing you say no kicked something for me down.
But that, like, her saying no, right? Like, I'm not conceding tonight. It's 2:00 in the morning. Like, we'll come back tomorrow. And they do a very beautiful job of, like, they're showing the B-roll basically of her speech to everyone, her concession speech, while she's explaining and talking her experience over it. And so she shares a moment of, like, I'm very good at being able to, like, put the public face speaking on, right? And, like, not show the pain I'm feeling. She's like, but in all of my life, in all of the speeches I've given, I have never wanted to cry more. Like, I'm standing up there, I am conceding to this man who, here's the laundry list. And I have to say, I'm so sorry to that 10-year-old girl who's in Florida who thought she could potentially run for president, and now she doesn't have that, right? There's no one for that girl to look up to and say, I could be president one day, because she's done it.
And on the macro level, I don't know if that's the right word, but it's also, and what does it say that people would rather him than me? And
that's a mental fight for her.
I can only imagine. Because even as a woman, I remember the anger and the rage inside of me of, are you out of your goddamn mind? Are we all out of our goddamn mind? That we would rather him, with, to your point, we don't need to go over it, the laundry list that's never ended, versus a woman who is highly qualified for the job. What is wrong with us? What is it going to take?
Yeah.
The distraught. Distraught is the only word that comes to mind.
And again, she showed up like the Hillary Clinton I know and love at his inauguration in the role of First Lady of Bill Clinton. And she showed up with grace and humility and was there, right? Like, and then we fast forward to January of 2017, where everything, like, it was the woman's moment, the pink hat, Me Too movement, like, and she acknowledges that of, like, maybe I was the impetus and I didn't get, the presidential office, but look what we've seen. Look at the sense of social responsibility. Look at the 2018 midterms, the number of women, first-time candidates running, the number of minority women running, like, and I think her being able to name that and acknowledge, like, yeah, it hurt. Like, yes, I lost what I was going for, and that we didn't break the ultimate glass ceiling. And she has a comment of, like, but there are 18,000 cracks in it from this race. It just, to me, is like, it was the epitome of why I thought she was the best candidate for that job, and had the grace she's been able to hold herself with since then. And the other thing that this docuseries allowed was, like, just showing a little bit of her humanity, of who she was, right? Like, they have a whole conversation about Bernie Sanders, right? And him as a person. And she's very honest, just, like, straight up, like, no one liked him. No one could ever get work done with him in the Senate. Like, you want to say he's not establishment? He's been in Congress for 40 years. Like, you want to talk about establishment? Like, he's there, he's in it, he's been in it. Like, but yet we were able to be perceived as the establishment candidate because he decided as such.
Is she establishment, or do you think she absolutely isn't establishment?
Hillary? I think Hillary is, like, well, I think you have to define establishment, right? Like, establishment to me is a institution that holds certain beliefs and certain structures of how you can and cannot interact with it, right? Like, they are both establishment candidates, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump, not establishment.
That's interesting, because I know that's
not an establishment candidate.
That's been debated, yeah. And I have the reason I asked that is I had the same kind of back and forth conversation in another country with Jeremy Corbyn. And we've got a good definition in UK politics of he was, for me, 100% establishment, but he was a backbencher. He was one of those people sat at the back that the camera wasn't on. He wasn't one of the core politicians. He wasn't the man about town, the person that you would look at and say he will be next. He's prepping his career and he's doing all the right things so that he can become prime minister one day. And I know you can't put Hillary in that category either, but I've always found that term, because it does piss me off how we throw around the word insiders, outsiders, establishment, anti-establishment, without, to your point, you just did it there, without actually defining what we mean by that. When people say we don't want someone that's establishment, but all of the people because in my mind, Donald Trump is and isn't. For me, he's establishment. If I look at it, it's another white middle-aged man who can get away with anything and yet is still being elected. Like, that's my male establishment that I grapple with. But to your point, he's not actually, when you look at the proper definition, whatever that is, of what establishment is.
Well, and I think there's different versions of it, right, Tony? And you clearly articulated that there of your interpretation of a male establishment, as opposed to when I think of establishment, I think of political establishment, right? And so what's your political capital? How many senators have you actually worked with? Have you been able to work across party lines? Have you worked with state officials?
Did you grow up
that's
in this
what world? I think about. Exactly. Do you know the biggest consultants, the focus groups? That's who can you ring in your black Rolodex?
You're one part of that establishment. You know that you're one cog in that wheel. It's interesting listening to you talk about, for lack of better words, the human side of her. I cannot for the life of me remember what year this was, but when Hillary was Secretary of State, it must have been 2010, I think. I was doing my master's degree at the College of Europe in international politics and digital diplomacy, or just diplomacy at the time. And we were doing a whole class that I found was lacking a whole other component of the class. And I started to get in touch with Alec Ross, who was Hillary Clinton's senior advisor for innovation at the time, and got in touch with him on Twitter. And it, for me, said so much about who she was with the people that she had surrounded herself with, because I could not have come across the most gracious person. He's also came from the education space, so he loves teaching people. And I think it was the early days of Twitter as well. And I was like, you sound like a cocky, but, as my husband always said, balls to the walls, which I kind of love that expression, excuse my language, of, you don't ask, you don't get. And I just started talking with him on Twitter. He goes, it sounds like you know what you're doing. Yes, he was Hillary Clinton's senior advisor for innovation. I was like, I need someone to come and talk to the rest of my class about what it means to do digital politics in today's era of Twitter and internet and all of that. And he said, oh, Hillary and I are actually coming to Brussels. And I was like, is this actually happening? Are you kidding me right now? Loved it. And it ended up not happening because I cannot remember what happened, but something happened at an international stage that Hillary meant that she had to go back to Washington. But I met with him a couple of years later when he was back in Brussels, and it was just before she was running. And I remember being in an elevator with him and being cheeky and saying, is she going to run one day? And he just turned around and smiled and go, gosh, she'd be a phenomenal president. And when you look at someone who talks about someone else and you see the pride and the trust and the excitement in someone's eyes, it comes across, that's what I've never met her, and no one, you're the closest person I know to someone like that. But hearing you talk about her, what she's done, what she means for you, and what that documentary has done in showing that, it just reminded me of that, being in that tiny elevator in the European Commission and hearing him just this that pride that comes oozing out. And that says so much about who that person is that they're talking about.
And Toni, when you say the people that an individual surrounds himself with, that is something that her campaign, and I've worked on a lot of campaigns, but her campaign had phenomenal staff from every level of your volunteers, and to me, that comes from the top, right? Your leadership style, whether you're an organization, an entity, a nonprofit, a campaign, the leadership that you have and the way you lead your people allows for them. How do they interact with the general public? How do they interact digitally when a student reaches out to them, right? That comes from the leadership at the top, right? And people, this whole idea of I don't trust her, I can't trust her, blah. I can't be okay. I'm still not okay with it. And watching that documentary really just like hit me in the gut of, was it because she was a woman? Is that why we just couldn't get over it? We couldn't get over this idea of, I can't trust her. Maybe she's going to make a bad decision. She stayed with her husband. Maybe she's going to make a bad decision about the world.
And let's be honest here, Sorcha, we briefly spoke about this in one of our episodes about women in politics, and none of them are in the running at that time when we recorded that episode. None of them were left. So I actually think you're spot on. It's we seem incapable of trusting a woman. It's not him. Looking back now, it's not that we can trust, in my opinion, it's not that we can trust Hillary. It's clearly that we don't trust women, whomever. It's either we're too young, too old, too establishment, not establishment enough, too many kids, don't have kids.
We're not sure. There's just something.
Yeah, that's super useful.
There's just something. About her. And that to me is, there's a vagina.
That's the something.
Right? Like that's the something that I just can't put my name on it. I just can't. There's just something. The amount of times that was said in this docuseries of like, yeah, when we had a conversation with an undecided focus group, or we were out in Nebraska talking to voters, and like it just.
It's funny how when it's a man, people can name what that something is. Too arrogant.
Exactly.
Don't like the way he talks. Don't like his act. They can name it.
Or on the flip side, I don't know why, but I just love Trump. I can't put my finger on it, but he's just so real. Just to close out this convo on Hillary, because I want to chat with you about some other fun docuseries, is that last episode, right, where she's talking about her concession speech. And that night, for me personally, how I experienced it was Nation Builder had thrown a election night party, a watch party, very common in the US. They were everywhere. And I still, that Tuesday in November at 6:00 in the morning, was sure that she was winning. Yeah. I was like, I really was. And we went into the night, and, results keep rolling in, and Florida came in as red, and the whole the whole atmosphere shifted.
Imagine.
To this moment of uncertainty and confusion,
utter disbelief,
and just worry, right? And it's a closed ballot for a reason, but there are people in the room who I know and love and respect dearly, and I've had this conversation with them personally, who didn't vote for her for whatever reason and didn't vote for him. But in a first past the post electoral system, you know that by not voting for her, but you don't want him to win, you are in all ways throwing away your vote by voting for a third party candidate. And so for the people who were confused and perplexed, but yet used their vote knowingly, I still have a hard time being in conversation with folks like that. And there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party who did that, and, were too stubborn because Bernie didn't get it and they wanted Bernie, or, decided that they liked Evan, what is his name? Evan McMullin, right? Like,
who had no chance in winning.
I get it. Yeah. Right. I get it. But it's the lesser of two evils if you want to go that route. And I was a shell of a person there for the coming days and nights, but I knew I had a responsibility to reach out to the people that I had been working with over the past 9 months and congratulate them. It was wild. They were shocked.
It's interesting, Sorcha, because it's going to be hard to put out there without opening up a whole kind of worms, but I think it's an important one, is when you describe those people that you're just like, I have a hard time still to this day with the responsibility there of basically throwing away the vote. I have heard people say this to us, people like you and me, who have worked in tech, who have sold software to all of the candidates. And I just, it felt important to name that as well, that I know that people look at us and the responsibility and the role that we had to play in all of this. Well, if only you hadn't if only you hadn't have sold the software to that person. And I've always said it, I'm a big believer that the software doesn't win you an election, like full stop. I just don't believe in it. It's never a tagline that we've ever used that I've adamantly, pushed away. But there's something there, which is why I love these type of conversations, because the more we talk and understand where people are coming from in the actions that they're doing, the more I think we can move past. So, which is why this whole thing of even just this discussion now opened up my eyes of, there's just something I didn't like about her. Okay, but let's go look back at history and look back at where we are now. We still weren't able to help any of the women move forward because, again, what was it? There was something you didn't like about her. We just couldn't put our fingers on it. So there's just something there about, it's not the right thing, but being gentle to each other, but also being inquisitive of just like, why did you not vote? We have to talk about this. Why did you not vote for her? Why did you vote for someone else? Knowing that, why did we sell, and still to this day, selling technology to people that we believe should be allowed to run, even if we don't want them to win? And I think, there's something.
But Toni, like when the amount of people, and like in my role at Nation Builder in 2017 showed up in, a number of spaces that were progressive only, and in my own personal life, showed up in those spaces. And like I said, at the top, there were people in that ether that I couldn't tell this to. And I understand why, but it's a hard ask of someone to say, put your differences aside for a moment, your belief that whatever that thing is, and look at the greater good, right? Or the greater whole that you're trying to make change for, whatever the thing is. And if you can't, if you can only stay in your one ideological lane, if specifically talking about politics, then fine. But don't project and enforce that onto other people. Allow for there to be a dialogue and a difference of conversation, or else we will live in a polarized state where we can't get things crossed and government will be shut down and gridlock will be a thing. And like, we have to listen, and we have to do a better job of listening as a culture.
And it sounds like, for me, hearing the whole episode, the whole experience that you've just had, it sounds like you sat down, watched this documentary, you relived all of those moments, and we as we do, we question our role that we had, or role that we played or didn't play or should have played or could have played better, whatever. That's just like, that's who we are, that's what we do. But and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it was somewhat cathartic of being able to 4 years later actually get all of that out, see it all, and go, okay, that was a moment in time, and now I'm able to sit down, listen to it, watch it, and sort of digest it, and whilst still being kind to ourselves, and wouldn't have done anything differently, wouldn't have rechanged history, would have, I don't know. There's something there about.
Yeah, I think like being kind to yourself is real. I do always live in the, would it have been different if I didn't start working at a software company, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I've gotten to the point where I'm kind to myself yet.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us and for sticking with us until the end. Welcome to all of the new people. Hope you enjoyed your first episode. You can always get all of the episodes at www.unapologeticwomen.co, or you can also follow us on Instagram, and you can find all of these on all of the places you would normally get your episodes. Thank you, and talk to you next week.